we hear so much about TUSLA in recent months, but it's only when you meet the mothers that are affected by what's happening. It's only when you get a phone call and you go to a mother down the country whose children has been taken that day by two social workers, and you hold her in your arms and she's screaming. And I would have to say that the cries of those mothers in my arms is something that I'm going to take with me to the grave.
First of all, I just need to compliment you and all the other ladies who were involved in devising the report, coming up with the idea of the report. Actually, in one way, the report is quite amazing because it does something which is not done very often. It actually speaks to the people who are affected by what's going on. It doesn't take an academic view, it doesn't take a view of all the people who work in the field. What it actually takes is a view of the people who are affected. And I think that really, in that sense, it is a really valuable report. And it has some tremendous recommendations in it, which, as you referred to already, and have already been made in various different forums before, and maybe one or two added to it this time. So I think I won't say any more about the report, except to say that the whole report, and it's really sad that there are only women here listening to me, is actually about men. The problem that is generated is a problem generated by men. And these men are similar in style and behaviour to what we would have called the paedophile. And in their intimate relationships and in their family dynamic, they actually act worse than the paedophile. And that might sound pretty outrageous, but they do. I call them psychophiles because they befriend the mind of a mother and they twist the mother's mind until she doesn't know whether she is a mother or a partner or a wife or a slave. And she is unable to cope with the abuse and coercion and intimidation that she suffers on a daily basis. And yet, when she encounters the services, she gets the blame. And why does that happen? It happens for two reasons. First of all, the transfer of blame is the first step that the man does in the relationship, whereby he gets the woman to examine her own behaviour rather than his. And the second thing is that she accepts the blame and tells everybody that she is the problem. And where does that leave us? It leaves us tidying up the mess that's generated by men who are never met by the system, who don't go to meetings, who don't get called in by the social workers, who don't get addressed by barristers or solicitors. Instead of that, these men walk the streets with their heads held high. The reasons why they do it is that they can hold their head high because they are never sanctioned. They live in a life that is driven by entitlement and arrogance. And you may well ask, where does the entitlement come from? It comes from their belief that sexually they are superior than the women. And that gives them the entitlement, and having reaffirmed their entitlement repeatedly, they end up being extremely arrogant. In this arrogance, they assess their rights over others. So you have the TUSLA, the triad, as Anna calls them, the family law courts and the Garda Síochána, all trying to deal with somebody who is asserting his own rights. They also are manipulated by these people, and sadly to say, the manipulation goes on in every form of court proceedings, but it is even more damaging when it involves women and children, whereas when these people who are entitled come before the judge for issues of false claims or fraud or anything like that, they don't manage to manipulate the judge at all. But I've been in the courts. I attend a court as a Mackenzie friend or as an expert witness, and I have seen judges being manipulated, and I have seen my clients being told, shut up, it's all your fault. So if we're going to change, if there won't be another press conference in 100 years' time dealing with the same issue, what needs to happen is that we need to identify the problem. We need to take out the tumour that's causing all this angst and causing all this difficulty. The tumour must be diagnosed, must be examined, sliced up, looked into, and saying what the hell is going on with a vast minority of the men in this country, because what I'm talking about is rife. And I have permission to say this, but I don't know if you recall Clodagh Haw and her 3 sons. But if Clodagh Haw and her 3 sons had come to the services that this country has developed over the last 50 or 60 years, she would still be dead. And that's a very sad reflection on all of us and what we were supposed to do. So if we are to change anything, if we are to address the issue at ground level, which seems to be the only place to talk about it, there is no point in taking it to Parliament or to taking it to the higher academic places. Women need to get together, and we need, with the help of decent men, to protect the women and children of Ireland. And that's the only thing that will be of any benefit to the children, because if their mothers are not protected, the children certainly can't be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. And to that I will add that I emailed Don the report 2 weeks ago, and Stephen, I'll introduce now Stephen Kerwin. Stephen is a solicitor, and he is from the firm KOD Lyons, who are the leading human rights lawyers in Ireland, and they're headed up by Gareth Noble.
And thanks very much for the invite. It seems like we've come a long way since I was your student in St. Joseph's Rocher Bridge a number of years ago, but thanks again for inviting me. I have to say the report, again, as a practitioner who deals with these issues on a daily basis in various forms, the report is unique in some respects, but also mirrors what a lot of academics and commentators in terms of the international sphere have talked about for years, which is openness and transparency in relation to the family law system. I don't really know, I suppose, what the optimum solution is in any family law case, because there are difficulties, and balance always creates problems in relation to the right to privacy on one hand and confidentiality, but on the other hand, the secrecy of the state. I've been fortunate enough to work on many cases, including the Magdalene ex gratia scheme, working with women who've been infected by the mother and baby home scandal. And the similarities between what is happening to vulnerable women in the court system is mirrored by the exact same issues that have occurred in those institutions then. And the onus on us as practitioners, and certainly the onus on professionals, is to speak up where possible in relation to reforms that we believe need to be introduced. There is a constitutional guarantee that justice be administered in public. The proviso in Article 34.1 does say save as in such special and limited circumstances as are provided by law. And what that has done is that has fostered a culture whereby legislators in particular have gone above and beyond to try and keep this veil of secrecy in terms of how proceedings have operated. Now, things have improved. The Courts and Civil Law Miscellaneous Act 2013 purported to bring in some decent amendments to the 2004 Act by allowing, bona fide representatives to attend childcare cases and family law cases under the guise that, ultimately there would be confidentiality restrictions in relation to names and identifying features. But what in fact has happened is that we've introduced catch-all exemptions as part of that Miscellaneous Provisions Act. And a judge essentially can bar or prohibit a bona fide reporter from reporting in a variety of broad circumstances, such as whether it's in the interest of justice, again, this nebulous idea that is there, and a very subjective idea in some respects, and also that they can prohibit it if it causes undue stress to parties. That is also one of the broadly used exemptions that's there. It's funny when you contrast that to proceedings involving sexual assault or rape. Judges can't even go that far in those cases. And in fact, the argument would be that the in-camera rule on family and childcare law proceedings is gives them much more discretion in terms of who they can allow present and who can't. I mean, we've all remembered the recent case of boy A and boy B in the criminal courts and how that was reported on. I have to say quite tastefully in some respects. I know the judge had criticism of some other reporters in relation to that case, but that situation wouldn't even be allowed to happen, arguably, given the wide powers given to judges under the 2004 Act, even with the amendment under 2013. I suppose the other thing that the report highlights, which is very, very important, is family law facilities. I mean, it's been a massive problem here. I mean, only recently, Dolphin House, which is based in Temple Bar, was used both for childcare and family law proceedings. Many violent men and women, for that matter, but certainly men in the majority of cases, were present there. There was no such thing as separating of witnesses. There was a very small corridor, very private, no private rooms. I think there was one consultation room for social workers and for TUSLA staff, a legal room or legal practitioner's room. And other than that, it was open season, and certainly trying to have private and privileged conversations with very, very vulnerable clients. It certainly led to intimidation in a lot of cases, and that's replicated around courts all over Ireland. Where they're using old courtrooms. I mean, the idea of childcare proceedings or family law proceedings is that it's inquisitorial. The idea is to get to the truth in the most objective way possible, and unfortunately, given even the design of our courts not being in accordance with international best practice, makes people who appear there feel like victims, feel like they're on trial, and that is not what the purpose of family law proceedings are supposed to be. So even the very basic things like the design of court, again, it's this power structure that's there, this inherent power dynamic that ultimately gives judges, it creates this sense of someone being on trial, and certainly family law proceedings and childcare proceedings should not be about that. Now, of course, I mean, I could go on all day about TUSLA. Certainly, we routinely, as part of County Line solicitors representing parents, and for full disclosure, guardians, guardian ad litems in some cases, have to deal with the Child and Family Agency an awful lot. And Minister Sapone has recently come out in the last couple of days to suggest that the system of guardian ad litems, that ultimately a new system is going to be implemented for court appointments. And the great soundbite is that every child is going to have a guardian ad litem. Well, the problem about that, and what her bill hasn't addressed, and perhaps as it goes through, it's probably unfair to comment on it as it's going through as a bill, but I would have the same concerns that the ABC report does have as well in relation to, well, independence of guardian ad litems, first of all, the question of proper regulation of that, and this idea that, in a lot of cases, guardians in particular are former social workers, former HSE workers, former TUSLA workers, and you're asking them to make an independent judgment, particularly with very, very vulnerable parents in relation to childcare proceedings. And I have to say, having been there on occasion, of course, it's like in every profession, there are people who do their job extremely well and people who don't. But what is certainly outrageous is the fact that there are district court judges in this country who are appointing solicitors as guardian ad litems, or family friends in some cases as guardian ad litems, and listening to the representations of the parties in terms of who should be appointed. Now, as I say, I would hope that Minister Sapone's, I would always have faith that could be amended, but I think anything that is going to dilute the independence of a proper independent inquisitorial voice there, I think we need to make sure and ensure that there is an independent body put in place. And I think the problem with the way in which the bill is structured is that TUSLA will certainly be very happy with the fact that they now have a list of with respect, people who are now going to be controlled by the minister. And I wonder, is there a conflict of interest in some respects? Now, again, I obviously don't want to comment until we've seen the final bill or the final act, and she has suggested there will be representations. But my experience has been that in a lot of cases it doesn't necessarily go towards the parent, that it's yet another stick to beat very vulnerable parents with, particularly given the constitutional protections which should be there for families. I don't really have much more to say in relation to the report other than to commend Anna again for wonderful work and for being a tireless advocate for a vulnerable group of people who are often forgotten in this process.
Thank you very much. And I would have to say that Stephen was an exceptional student. So
It shows.
yeah, sorry. And if I could just pick up on one point that you made at the beginning about you have been advocating for the former mothers in the mother and baby homes, and that you find now in dealing with mothers and TUSLA that there is an overlap there. And I would go so far as to say that the system hasn't changed at all. And if I could just single out one place, Bessborough, the mother and baby home that was run by the Order of Nuns in Cork, that has come under so much scrutiny and so much criticism in the media in recent months, is now run as a family centre. And we have women in our group that were sent there for 13-week courses. They're called parental capacity assessments, where they are observed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, interacting with their children. And at the end of those courses, they're told that they don't have the capacity to parent their children, and they're sent off packing home without their children, and the children are put back into foster care. So the abuse continues.
Who's running that?
It's an Order of Nuns.
Is running the
Yes, it's an Order of Nuns. Now they have left. They have the day-to-day running of Bessborough is carried out by professionals, but they still control. The board of directors is made up of a number of nuns. So if you go onto their website, Bessborough, you can actually read their annual reports, and they were annual reports. The last one, I think, was 2017, begins with it introduces the nuns. There's 5 nuns on the board. So this takes me on to our next guest, or our next speaker, Fionnuala McKenna. And Fionnuala is the spokesperson for ABC this morning, and we have a WhatsApp group. And for the last week, there has been huge conversation going on in the chat group as the mothers have been telling Fionnuala what she's to say this morning. So Fionnuala is the voice this morning for the mothers. So it's over to you, Fionnuala.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Fionnuala McKenna, and I am a master's student in Galway in creative practice, and the body of my work, my written work, deals with the invisibility really of women and the materiality of the woman's body in general. And it was from this research and investigation that piqued my interest, and that I got to know Anna, and in turn got to know the stories of the women. I'm supposed to be composed, actually, and talk for the women. And Don has hit the nail on the head in terms of bringing to the fore the main root of a problem, which he has said are men. I have to, in my investigation and dealing with the women, and I'm sorry now I've got emotional, I don't know where this has come from, but I have to just say from the outset, the silencing of women and the depth of silencing of women today is so enormous, and it's so underground, and it is being experienced from all facets of life, and particularly so from the stories of the women in ABC who deal with TUSLA, the guards, and the family courts. And while I have undergone academic research through French philosophers and French writings like the Luce Irigaray, and the need for women to be recognised as subjects in society and not as the other, to strip away from this understanding of men being the default and women being the other, women being abject, women being nothing. And it is frightening. It's even scary for me to sit here now, because I am checklisting what I'm saying. I'm checklisting what I can say, because there's so much I'd love, but because of what Stephen has explained in this in-camera rule, this gagging that exists, that nobody knows about, because you can't know about it, because we're under a veil of silence. And what the women have spoken about with regards to TUSLA and their experience, and people have encountered TUSLA for various reasons. Some mothers have approached TUSLA with problems that they may be encountering within their families for whatever reasons and various reasons. And I have to edit what I'm saying, so you're going to have to use your imagination and research as well. And what has been found from the women's reporting is that when mothers generally go and seek for help, they're very clear in what they need, but they seem to have to undergo this psychological breakdown, that there are problems created, and this analysis that you have to follow, apparently, before they can get to the nub of the problem. And very often, they're all down a rabbit hole, and the problem still exists. And mothers are then under suspect and are treated suspiciously. And problems then arise where there were no problems before. So from that point, mothers are almost now afraid to go to TUSLA, because they're being seen as a police force. That to enter your home, they have jurisdiction to enter your home. Legislation has given them these powers. Then there's a group of women in the organisation who have not approached TUSLA, but through abuse within the family home, sexual abuse, where fathers of children, their children, have been abused, and mothers are left in a dilemma of not knowing how to deal with it, and have gone through the legal process, have had barring orders delivered, barring orders have been broken, and this is where the dichotomy within the legal system exists, because family law is civil and you've criminal on the other end, but within civil law, family law, you have criminal acts. And criminal acts are not acted upon within the judiciary because it's seen as family. And it is totally crazy. And again, Stephen would be the one to come back on that. I can just hit the surface. So that's an area. So these barring orders are broken. Then TUSLA become involved. And TUSLA state that, in the best interest of the children, we must remove the children from the home, as opposed to removing the perpetrator and investigating the crimes of the perpetrator and supporting the mother who has to stand by her children and help them get through the trauma of sexual abuse. That is one area. Then there's the area of separation, where you go through custody and access, where access is given to fathers who are known to be violating their children. And again, the mothers raise the red flags. But because we're now in a climate whereby men have been deemed to have been underrepresented in the courts now swing 360 degrees around and afford them all the rights they feel they deserve. And as Don has described, in a lot of the cases, these men are very, very manipulative, which is why what happens with a vast majority of the women, and I suppose this is why I get emotional, it's unbelievable actually what is happening. These mothers are losing their children. They're losing custody of their own kids. These children that they carried within them, gave birth to and nurtured, are now being stripped from these very children that they're out to protect. And these children are handed over to men who are abusing them. And there is nowhere to turn. Because TUSLA, the family agency, if you read their website or read their literature, if you have the energy to get through it, you could get through a labyrinth much easier than navigate your way through the literature. It's all corporate language and it's all so wonderful. But they don't meet the needs. And what I'm saying in my own research is the invisibility of women, the silencing of women. It exists today. Women are being silenced. They're being run into the ground as if they don't have an intellect, they don't have intuition, they don't have a worth, they don't have a place. And it's not been reported on because the legal system copper fastens this silence. I can't go into the individual cases, and I have to again pick my words really carefully and edit within my head what I can say, for fear that whatever I would like to say and would make it much more easy to understand the depth of it and the emotional starkness of it if I were able to divulge a little bit more, but I can't. The relationship with the guards and mothers has come in some situations where guards are just refusing to take calls. The relationship between TUSLA and the guards is so skewed. It's unbelievable. It's actually hard to get your head around it. Because the guards need a warrant to get into your house. But yet they stand by agents of TUSLA who have, through legislation, been given the powers to enter your home and take children. And the guards stand there and oversee it. Now, I don't know what kind of conflict that is going on there. But then you go to the courts. And I say the family courts, and I'm looking into the family courts, but I'm holding the judges accountable. Because after all, a judge is placed, meant to be, I believe in theory, to be a wise person to administer justice, and have been given, endowed the powers to be able to understand and investigate situations. But what I'm hearing from the women, what the women report, the judges aren't qualified to deal with family law. I mean, where on earth are we going? Judges are not capable of dealing with family law. There are cases where women have gone to vary custody orders, and judges have turned around and says, too complicated, go to another court. Women are now going in as lay litigants themselves, because finance is yet another area to suppress women and to curtail their movements and to silence them. Accessing legal representation privately is astronomically expensive. You really need to have a healthy bank book to be able to do that. For a vast majority of women who are going through a separation or are single parents are already on such minimal budget of just barely surviving, the idea of hiring private legal representation doesn't exist. So you go down the legal aid route. Legal aid solicitors are paid pittance. And to be quite honest, it's like a little business. And this is with no disrespect, Stephen, as I know, and this isn't, but I just want to, without any disrespect to any profession here, but this again is coming from the women. It is like a business. And you're not taken seriously. You're just a number. There are cases when people's cases are just being read on the day. And here you're a mother, a parent, and you're investing every part of you, every molecule of your body, and you know every aspect of that life, and you want to state it, and you're relying on some representation who hasn't even really read your file, just got your bare details, and then shuts the case, and then sees you for 5 minutes and goes through this, and you're told once again to be quiet. Once again, be quiet. Or you attend court as a lay litigant, and depending on the judge, you're frowned upon. How dare you get out of your little box? How dare you step outside? How dare you address a judge in just regular, common language. How dare you reduce the viability of the legal system by suggesting that you can represent legally a case? So these are the stories, these aren't the stories, these are the points that are coming out. What you need to hear are the stories. So in order for you to hear those stories, how are women going to get to you?
They can't.
Like, how are women going to get to journalists to feed you your stories? Because with the in-camera rule, you can be prosecuted. If anybody finds a way that story can be identified, or if TUSLA have agents out there who can pick up on it, everybody will suffer. So how do we break this silencing gag? Like, what is the role of a journalist? Can journalists be immune to such things? That's an area I don't know. The women don't know. But you must understand, there are women who haven't seen their children in years. Can you imagine what it's like? Not being able to see your children for a month, 2 months, 5 months, a year, many years. You know, there are mothers who told me they're driving in their car and they see kids of their age and they're... Can you imagine what that's like every day? Every day is a jail sentence. It'd be better off being dead, because at least it's final. But for judges to impose that type of torture and suffering on mothers and then silence them and tell them to get on with life, or children can adapt, or fathers have rights, when these fathers or these abusers should actually be behind bars, when TUSLA should be coming to the aid of the family to keep children with their parent, their mother, as long and as closely as they can, to enable these kids to access services to alleviate the trauma that they've just been exposed to. And I'm going to stop now, but I have tried to be diligent in deliberate format, but Don and Stephen have done the best in delivering the overall frame. And I am a voice. I'm a mother myself, and I'm a woman, and I'm here to speak for the women of ABC.
This is going to be the next big scandal. Now, something very special. Trish Riley is a singer-songwriter, and she has written a beautiful ballad that I suppose captures the experience of the mothers. So she's going to get her guitar, have you got it there? And she's going to introduce her ballad, and we're going to bring our proceedings this morning to a close with this beautiful ballad.
We're talking about TUSLA now, but I was taken into care when I was 8 years of age. It was after the time that the industrial schools closed and the group homes were open. I was a member of the traveller community, and because of that, the state saw fit to remove me from my loving parents, 5 girls, one day, just like that, into the court, into care, because we didn't fit the societal norms, I suppose. And growing up in care, I would have had a lot of experiences on a daily basis of what it's like to be brought up in a system that really has no human element to it. Do you know what I mean? And I would have been listening to bureaucracy in everyday living, basically, you know, like, well, this is house policy and this is this, nothing about children first whatsoever, and it's the very same today. But this particular song, anyway, is just about the brokenness of consistency within a person's identity when you remove them from their natural family, be it from a traveller family or from any family. And you know, that the impact that it has from the child's perspective and where it leaves you then in your journey growing up. So I won't say too much more about it. I'll let the song talk for itself. Broken homes, broken hearts, broken truths made for bad starts, shattered dreams in broken minds. You can't bridge the distance between those broken lives. You lose your direction in a one-way track, but you keep on moving because you can't get back. And it makes no difference if you can read the signs. You can't bridge the distance between those broken lines. Those broken lines, they undersize you, they won't recognize you, they paralyze you. The distance between those broken lines. Temperature changes, you're hot and you're cold. You don't know your value, 'cause you've been bought and sold. As soon as you're in, you're told to go out. Those broken lines are what I'm talking about. Those broken lines, they undersize you, they won't recognize you, they paralyze you. The distance between those broken lines. It's not how you play, if it's on the cards. You're always a joker, never the queen of hearts. Always a loser, and you can never win. Those broken lines will always be a sin. Those broken lines, those broken lines, they'll undersize you, they won't recognize you, they'll paralyze you. The distance between those broken lines, you can't bridge the distance between those broken